So, hi, everybody. Steve Cady here with All Things Change, our podcast webinar series. I'm at Bowling Green State University and also with Nexus for Change. And we've got a nice group of people here, friends of mine. Bob's a dear friend from many years and continues. And so I'm really grateful for our connection. We're going to talk today about something that's quite interesting. Bob's embarking on a new journey. I would say the next evolution of his journey here and his work. And he's done some pretty amazing work building the leadership circle and his work with that. And that's been sent out like a bottle into the ocean, so to speak. And it's touching people all over the place. And hi, Kelly, welcome. I'm glad to see you here. And so this next level of work, I've had a chance to sit in with a little focus group experience. And it was really quite profound. It was very helpful to me. It was a perfect timing opportunity to sit with these concepts. And so Bob, thank you. Thanks for making the time to be with us today. And I hope we can do more of these and continue to help you get this work out in the world in front of people and help people invite people in. As we get started, is there anything you want to just say hello to everybody?
Yeah, great to be with you this morning. What Steve didn't say is I'm a graduate of the OD program at Bowling Green years ago. Went there in 81 and 82 and finally graduated in 86. Took me a while to get the thesis done. So it was definitely a way into what's unfolded in my life and career.
Yeah. And so I think to jump in, and really within the context of this notion of integral informed practice by Unity, I thought we could focus on this notion of the essence of presence and talk a little bit about that with you. And maybe you could invite us into just a short starting activity that would help us touch on this notion of essence and maybe how you like to get in touch with your essence and get present.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about it first, go back and forth.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's the work that I'm now leaning into. We may get into stages of adult development and how that relates to leadership later on in this conversation, but that's where I've spent most of my career. In the leadership circle profile is designed to target development at certain stages where most adults inhabit. And we call that a move from reactive to creative. And Bob Keegan's work, it's a move from being authored by others, or what he calls socialized mind, into being self-authored. So if you're familiar with that literature, that's now I'm now saying, okay, we've done 20, 30 years of good work there. What's the next evolution? What's it look like when you move from this really strong creative leader position into stages of adult development and leadership that are beyond that? So I'm out on the edge, maybe even the bleeding edge, which is what I do, and try to distill that back. So essentially, this work is about, at its essence, it's about presence. As people in the business of change, all things change. How are we, and the very presence that we bring when we walk in the room, how are we the catalyst? We have this fun statement we got from one of our clients: leaders bring the weather. And we know this is true, right? You're in a meeting, the boss walks in, and everybody's on cue for what's the weather today. So we know that the presence, the energy that the leader embodies in that moment has everything to do with what can happen in that moment. It can open up the conversation. It can make it safe, even beyond safe, open up possibility space for something really creative to emerge, some new insight that nobody had when they walked in the room. Or it can close down and constrict the conversation. And everybody knows, okay, we're not going to have the real conversation today. So how you show up has everything to do with the creative process or the lack thereof that's going to unfold. And so what we're learning about these later stages is that a presence becomes profoundly transformative. And there are practices that we can engage in that open this up. And so that's what I've been up to. And it's an integration of the wisdom traditions with adult development, but also with quantum physics. One of the things I'm really excited about is that there's a convergence happening right now, really unprecedented in human history. First of all, I was just thinking this morning, the internet's not been around. I've been around twice as long as the internet, right? So the internet's only been around half of my life. That's a short period of time in human history. And now we can literally all these great bodies of literature, most of which have never been translated, are being translated and made available. So the world's wisdom is more available for cross-learning and integration and seeing the alignments and so on than ever before. And then you've got quantum mechanics opening it up, the same space up from a very different methodology and understanding. And so our understanding of the reality in which we are living is going through a massive paradigm shift. And it's a paradigm shift that I think is essential if we're going to create a more sustainable future as a species. So we can get into that. But essentially, we're working with what happens when the leader consciously, through practice, can shift their energy and shift their presence and shift the transmission of their embodied presence.
Yeah.
So I was talking, let me do one, then I was talking with one of the senior leaders, he was a healthcare leader. Every organization he goes into or is put into, it's a massive OD transformation. Everything turns around, all the metrics turns around. He's an amazing leader. And he went through one of our early pilots in this stuff. And he wrote me and said, I'm getting it. So I'm in a meeting, I'm closing, it's a very pivotal meeting. And I know I need to say something at the end to really wrap it up and anchor it in. And I'm speaking to them and I realize I'm speaking to them from my head. I'm talking at them. I'm trying to convince them. And I simply stop. Now watch what I do. See me leaning? I'm pushing it out. I'm trying to be impressive. I'm trying to make a point. He said, I stopped and I went silent. And the whole room went silent with me. And then I knew what to say. And I let it speak me. It spoke through me. And when I was done, I wasn't even sure what I had said, but the whole room was galvanized. Stunned silence, he said. And one of the senior physician administrators said, that's exactly what we needed to hear and where we needed to end this meeting. That's presence. And it's cultivated. This man has had a long meditative tradition, practice. And so we're actively working on how do you, with practice, become that presence, the very resonance of which, or energy of which, or countenance of which changes the possibility space of the room. So that's what I mean by presence. And the deeper you go into that, the more power you run through your body, the more palpable and powerful that energy is. You literally can become radiantly present in a way that people just go, oh, okay. And as most of the one half of our client base is leaders, the other half are coaches and consultants who do deep transformative work with people. And so how do we get more present in a way where the parts of the client that feel most vulnerable are welcomed into the conversation, made space for? And the beauty of it is that the other doesn't really know what's happening. They just feel invited by the whole resonance of the conversation. And you know what that feels like. And so we're working on the active practice of showing up more and more fully human, fully embodied in all that we are. I've been doing a lot of learning and reading in this space in the last 4 years, and there have been times when I get really angry because it's so utterly simple and obvious, not just intellectually, but I've got my own practice of experiencing what I'm learning about. It's so utterly elegant and simple and obvious. And you go, why has nobody ever taught me this? The reason for that is that because it's outside of the paradigm. It's the paradigm that we've grown up in, like fish in water, is antithetical to the kind of practice I'm talking about. It's been excised from our education and discourse. Pretty whole lock, stock, and barrel. And so even in science, the fundamental awarenesses of quantum physics are very slow to make it into even the kind of mainstream quantum physicist. It's really interesting when you get very close to people in that field. And so we're in a very big paradigm shift possibility here. And if we want to create the next generation of leadership that can usher in a thriving future for the planet and all of its inhabitants, we need to reground our very understanding of how it all works. And that's happening. It's very exciting and it's emergent right now. And frankly, the whole field of leadership is starting to turn and move toward it. I was talking with my partner, Bill, and Bill watches the market. He's very commercial and he's very on top of trends in the field. And he said, Bob, I'm so glad you're into this work because the field is turning and it's starting to move toward this more conscious awareness space, later stage of awareness that we're describing. So that's a mouthful. I get it. Steve, you wanna ask anything there, or do you wanna just drop into?
Yeah, I think there's some things I want to explore with you around this, and I think we will all want to do that. But I think it would be good to take a minute for us to see where we can touch right now personally, just to have to give some context. And maybe see what we can touch right now, have a little brief conversation and come back and unpack some of that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good. So I'm going to do something I've never done virtually, try it. We have this one framework called the forward circle and the backward circle, and it comes from I think it comes from a Zen teacher where he says something very simple like, if you're on the forward circle, get off of it. And the forward circle is when I'm in push, when I'm in striving, when I'm going to stand up, I'm going to push into this, I'm going to make this happen, right? I got to be convincing, I got to be on top of this, I got to be, right? So I want everybody just to lean into that energy for a minute. Just lean into it. Everybody now, I don't know, sort of take in the feel, take in the energy of the group here. Just everybody's in push. Everybody's kind of trying to make it happen here. Now step back and drop down and back and in. Did you notice a shift in your body? Just that. And so this is the beginning. It's learning when we're in this highly contracted, actually, state, push, striving, afraid, holding back, protected, whatever the form of it is. How do we notice that and simply drop? And one way to do that is with your breath. So if you look at all the traditions, north, south, east, west, they all begin with breath. And so what I'd like you to do, and you can either leave your eyes open and just look down, soft eyes, or close your eyes. Just notice your breath. Bring your attention to the center of your chest and notice your breath. You don't have to breathe differently. You don't have to do anything with your breath. Just experience it. The inhale, the exhale. Thoughts might come and go, that's okay. Just return to your breath. As you inhale, I want you to breathe energy in. There's the energy of oxygen. In other traditions, there's more subtle energies that we now call the quantum field. And breathe it in and notice if you can feel your breathing in your belly. And breathing that energy into your belly. Dropping your awareness down. And notice if you can feel the pulsation of your breath all the way to the pelvic floor. Energizing the pelvic floor. Noticing the obvious sensations of your body, the whole thoracic part of your body. Or even more subtle sensations of breath. Now notice your spine. You breathe in through your spine. Let your attention move from the pelvic floor up the spine. Notice what that feels like. Notice your breath in the throat, in the back of the throat. And up into the head. And the brain. Breathing in through the top of your head. So that the energy comes down through the top of your head into the center of your chest, your heart space, your lungs, and radiates from there through your entire body. Feeling more energized, more balanced, more still. Breathing from the top of your head all the way down to the pelvic floor and tracing it up the back. So that you're literally circulating this life energy down the front and up the back with each breath. Notice the stillness that emerges. The awareness of subtler nuances in your body. Notice the stillness that it opens, that expands. Now what I want you to do is stay with this. Stay present, breathing. Stay present internally. And slowly open your eyes. So that you can look around or look at the screen. And also, with dual attention, aware internally of your breath and the subtle sensations of your body. And people on the screen, so that you can hold both. And now what I'm going to do is have you dropped into a breakout. And all I want you to do is sit there for 30 seconds in this dual attention with the other person, making eye contact, not talking, just being present. Notice what that's like. Notice what happens in your body when you do that. Does it feel good? Does it open? Do you get more present, more grounded, or do you get shy and constrict, feel an edge of vulnerability? Just notice subtle sensations of what happens just to connect in this presence. Okay, Lisa, put them into groups. We're going to be 4 minutes here. So you do about 30 seconds of just connecting, and then some time to talk about your experience of this. But stay in that connection as you talk. Speak from the dual attention. All right, have at it. Welcome back.
Yeah,
Welcome.
welcome
Diamond
back, everybody.
Dave.
Or have joined.
Better late than never.
So we're going to just take a few minutes before we move into some more and kind of collect your experience. What, if anything, seems important or relevant to say about your experience of dropping in and connecting in maybe just a little more presence than might be typical? What'd you notice about that?
So, hi Bob, Jervis
Hi.
Bush. So I was surprised that in some ways how easy that was for me. Like when I was thinking about it, I was thinking how difficult it's going to be to stay aware of my body and be interacting with somebody at the same time. And yet I've had 5 years of somatic psychotherapy, 4 years.
Bingo. Yeah.
Like I'm kind of wondering how somebody, going through an induction like that for the first time, which reminded me of stuff I did in the 70s in workshops, like, can you, like, what are you learning about what it takes to actually help someone who this is just a whole new world to step into? Like, how does that happen in a weekend workshop? Like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jervis, that's really good, and it's so good to see you. So big hug. It's been a while since we've seen each other. One of the things in the workshop that I found really, and I'm curious what other people thought. You touched on this no dual attention was a bit new to me. When we did the workshop with you a few months ago,
Yep.
and I started working on this dual attention, me being present with me here while I'm with you right now, Jervis, as I'm talking,
Yeah.
and being kind of, and it's I think it's about practicing that, I think, because but it was new to me, you know?
yeah. So you came out of that with an intent that this was something you wanted to develop, and so you're still in the process of it.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah.
We're working with leaders at all levels, and of course it has to be targeted to a level. Right now I'm targeting later stage coaches and consultants. So I mean, we're really leaning into that. But just that very visceral working with breath and giving people some practice at speaking from there can be very powerful. A leader says, wow, I just dropped, I noticed and I dropped in, I just dropped, and everything shifted, the meeting shifted on its axis. And so there is a accessibility here. The other thing is I'm pulling in energetic practices from various traditions that are they have a long lineage, and that makes different energetic states very accessible. Like people go, oh, wow, that's different. I don't want to leave. I wish I could be here all the time. Okay, let's practice that because it's a very accessible practice. And then when you say drop in, they drop in, and now more is available. So we're trying to really draw from many traditions, integrate, and say, okay, here's practices that reliably and pretty quickly access a much more open, present state of awareness. And then you are paying attention to it, and things occur to you to say or not say. Information, intuition works. And I was in a conversation with a consultant, and she was talking about a particularly difficult time that she's going through, where her work went from very expanded to like really contracting. And I just found myself saying things. And she wrote me today saying that was so helpful. And what I was doing was listening in here, present, hearing the conversation, but my attention was dual, and stuff emerged to say. And that's the practice.
Yeah. Rosa, you had something you wanted to say?
Oh, I just, yeah, I'll start with thank you. When I came in, I came in a little bit late, my apologies. You were talking about the climate in the room and how what the leader does. And I think you were talking about like the leader is like the manager or the decider in the room, what the authority figure in the room does, how it affects the whole conversation that can unfold. And people sometimes saying, oh, well, we're not going to have that conversation today if they can sense that the leader is not really ready to hear it, right? Yeah, and so I was really, I felt very happy and inspired when you mentioned that your friend who is saying that this shift is really happening, right? Because we really need this shift to happen. And I just love hearing you use the word intuition, right? Because that's part of the shift that needs to happen, that we need to become able with talking to talk about words like intuition and energy and love and like that, right? Because
There's an interview on our website with Federico Fagin, where I interviewed him for about an hour and a half. He's the guy that invented the microprocessor. He's a serial inventor. He invented the technology that made the first computer chip possible. He invented the first computer chip and subsequent chips, put Intel on the map, then left and is a serial entrepreneur. He's a physicist and an engineer, electrical engineer, and he's very clear about the role intuition played in his discoveries.
And it's really amazing. So Dave, so one more thing, because I want to make sure we take about 15 minutes to talk about this notion of integral and unitive, and I want to make some time to wrap up with that. So Dave, if you could share a little bit or ask, and then we'll move on to that.
Well, I have the image of the octopus. And if you watch any of the documentaries about octopi, they are constantly adjusting to not only where they are in the moment by virtue of their color and all of that, but as they move forward, they adjust to each of the new venues in which they move, hunting or whatever the reason. I think we do too. I think we humans, as to Lisa's point, if a certain climate change happens in a meeting, we might all turn gray. And
Yep.
then
Yeah.
that is gone and we all, brighten up. So I think we can learn from the octopi. That's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add to that, how can we get more conscious about that?
Yeah.
Managing how we're showing up in the midst of those circumstances and with a wider bandwidth of options,
Yes.
right? And because the earlier stages are much more contracted and we're not at choice and we have fewer range of options for that. So we're talking about expanding the bandwidth and range with which we can meet a situation.
Yeah. So one of the things to share with you all have the link. I put it into the chat, and just wanted you all to have access to it. But what I'm sharing with you is the levels, and I think this gets at the core of your work. Where Bob began is his work down on this lower level here, and the leadership circle helps people to get a sense of moving beyond egocentric into understanding the reactive, which can be, for those of you familiar with Jungian work around shadow and areas of protection, and almost like the moving backward in the circle, forward and backward a little bit, but but the idea of being reactive and then creative is moving into that place of connecting and being present and coming from a more grounded, healthy place, and engaging with people. And then, so those two, that's a good bit, that's a lifetime of work right there to
Right.
manage the creative and reactive, and to get into a good place of balancing that, because the reactive side, being protective is sometimes appropriate. So reactive is, and being creative can be overdone. So you can overdo these two pieces if it's about working in balance and working with them, maybe a duality there even. And then, so what's next for you has been moving into this integral and unitive. Could you talk a little bit about how moving beyond the creative, and maybe give us a little bit, like, based on what I've said, what would you say would be the stepping off point from creative into integral? What does that mean to step off of creative into integral?
Well, let me just lay a couple of foundational pieces. Bob Kegan we call it reactive leadership, but it's underneath it predominantly is what he calls socialized level of development. Bob Kegan's the foremost researcher in the world, one of them, probably the most known, on stages of adult development, a la Kohlberg and Lovinger and others. He says that the predominant form of mind right now for most people is what he calls socialized mind, or you're living out of your conditioning. You're authored more by others than by self. You have well-honed beliefs and assumptions about how you have to be in order to be safe, in order to be effective, and so on. And they have you. You don't have them. They're on autopilot. So the work, and that's where Steve mentioned shadow, part of the work of moving into creative is starting to see them and free up from them. So for example, for me, one of them was, I'm okay if you like me. If I'm agreeable, nice, acceptable, my worth is in your hands and it's tied to your approval and affirmation of me. Hard to lead from that set of assumptions. So the work, and there are many different forms of what we can identify with here. So it's really a play not to lose game. It's a fear-based game. How do I forward my objectives, but also live up to all of these voices, many of which are long in my past? And that's the normal, healthy move of early adult life, and most adults live their whole life here. If we move into the creative, we become what Kegan calls self-authoring. Here, what happens is the purpose and vision by which I feel called now has my attention. I'm about creating something that I care about, becoming the kind of person who can create that. And so vision, purpose, strategy, authenticity, integrity, all the ways we define great leadership, interpersonally competent, self-aware, emotionally intelligent, all of that begins to boot up. And that's a very high and effective form of leadership, and it's not accessible from reactive. And this is how we describe leadership primarily. Integral moves beyond it. And each transitional stage is a kind of dismantling of the self as I have come to know it, however hard earned, and a reconfiguring it at the next higher order of structure. So I'm literally metamorphosizing, which means it's not a pleasant spot. The old ways don't work anymore, and the new ways haven't booted up yet. The old self is meeting its limits. The new self, I don't know yet. And so the move from creative is a surrendering of this hard-earned, authentic, visionary self. I start to meet, I keep it, I have it, but I notice that I'm much more than that. That I also have shadows, opposites. I can love you and I can wish you harm. I can stand passionately for high involvement workplaces, and I'm controlling. And so I start to notice the Jekyll and Hyde of myself. But here the work is one of moving toward it, into it, not trying to fix or change, but simply meeting it, holding the complexity of myself in a new order of balance, not trying to solve, fix, exercise these other parts out of myself. And so I literally become a microcosm of the whole system. The whole system is in me, and I am a reflection of the whole system. Therefore, you are not my enemy. And so it becomes a very profound place to meet and engage deep systemic systems, thinking boots up here and so on, deep systemic intracted problems, because I'm no longer projecting them out there and don't have a part in them. I also don't blame you for them. Let's really explore this with curiosity and see what wants to emerge. And so it's a very high form of leadership. There are many other aspects to it that we could talk about, but it's a very high form of leadership. It's the kind of leadership that Gorbachev exhibited at Reykjavik, where he walked into Reagan. Now, mind you, the arms race is escalating. And he walks in and he says to Reagan, "I'm here to deprive you of an enemy. You can't get to that statement from reactive. You don't even get there from creative. That only comes from seeing my part and our contribution in the dance that we're in together, and how I'm turning you into an enemy, and I'm here to stop the game. I see the system. I see the structure of it. Let's end the dance. I'm here to deprive you of an enemy. I disarm unilaterally. Deal with that." That's an integral move. So it's a very high form of leadership. And as we open into it, we start the process of deconstructing even the concept of a self. And it begins to open into more unitive understanding of ourselves and of reality, if it moves on. And there's now growing research. I'm working with Terry O'Fallon. We're going to do a workshop together in June on these stages, but her models go up with measuring very late stages that move into the more unitive dimensions of understanding of self and reality. And she calls them meta-awarenesses. Who and what we are becomes quite extraordinary at these stages of understanding and self. And the more that they become embodied, the more powerful our presence becomes. And so I'm sort of jumping. I'm working primarily the integral space, but I'm also opening into like the ability to be informed by the higher field of intelligence that we are in. And Wordsworth once said, we lie in the lap of immense intelligence. We are the receivers of its truth and the organs of its activity. And what we're discovering now about the quantum nature of reality makes this not merely metaphysics, but literally the case. We do lie in the lap of an immense intelligent field, a field of intelligence. And we are emergent from it. We are formed and informed by it. So that we can intuit and receive information. The more porous, the more open, the more in flow we become, the more we're accessing the intelligence that's always already there. But that takes quite a bit of work to open up the shadows and deconstrict the body so that it becomes more and more sensitive, sensate awareness of the field that we are. And so that's just really a brief sketch.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And I think that there's a lot to take away from this. So I would just invite us to sit with our piece today.
As I was listening to Bob, I looked at the word leadership and my mind said, maybe this is something else along with leadership. Maybe it's a state of beingness, a way of being, and fulfilling a much more of our potential of human being. And that takes some of our social responsibility away for a few minutes, whereas leadership is, in my mind, always seems to be connected to other people, whereas beingness can grow with or without that responsibility for others. I don't know, Bob. I know we only got a minute left.
It's great. Warren Bennis's great seminal book on leadership, On Becoming a Leader. He named Carl Rogers' work on becoming a person.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so he said this is the same thing, that real greatness in leadership requires greatness of being. Right? They're not separate.
No, I'll take the marriage of the two.
Yeah, exactly. Great leaders are
I just gotta say, I'm loving this conversation. I gotta leave. I really wish I wasn't. Thank you.
Yeah,
we're at the end of our time.
This is just getting really interesting now.
Yeah. More to come. More to come. But I think today let's sit with our gift for today And that's our thing that we're going to take with us today. Bob, thank you. Big hug. I appreciate it. All
Yeah,
of you, thanks
thank
for
you.
being here. It's been a really nice time with you and time together. Blessings to all of you, and Bob to you, and have a great day, everybody. And so
Thank
bye
you,
for now.
Steve.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.